Welcome to the introduction of corporate finance. You will find that this lecture is quite interesting and helpful. You can use it in your daily life, whether it be in work or in personal basics. I will cover foundational topics that will help you succeed not only as a financial analyst, as a financial manager, but also in general as director or vice president of your own company. I will also cover points that will help you tremendously in your personal life. Things like calculating a mortgage, how much money I need to save today to reach my financial goals in 30 or 40 years from now. So cover for a lot of things that are very relevant on a corporate financial basics, but also on a personal financial basics. The information presented today is quite closely to the textbook Fundamental of Corporate Finance by Ross Westerfield in Jordan. This book is one of the bestsellers in the undergraduate field, and the covers is just on about the essentials you need to know to become an outstanding manager, or also help you to have basic understanding of all financial features. In this lecture, we will do questions. Number one is, what is corporate finance? And number two, what are the forms of business organization if I want to start a business? Including something like what type of business form is available to me. The story of Steve Jobs and Apple ties together lots of concepts in this lecture very well. So we're gonna talk for a few seconds about Steve Jobs and the founding of Apple and how he's doing these days. Apple Computer was founded in 1976 in Los Altos, California. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were the co-founders at that time. Sales grew very rapidly with the Apple I to Apple II in educational market. And the Macintosh is a very popular computer. Then around 1985, around 9 years later, there's an industry-wide sales slump and Apple get caught a little bit. At this moment, Steve Jobs was relieved of his duty. So here, he was the founder of the company, an entrepreneur, and an executive that was relieved by the board of directors. And when he went on to find the next computer generation, and it was an amazing success for both Steve Jobs, the company. In 1985, Steve Jobs had 7 million shares that worth 120 million, and Apple was worth 1 billion USD when he left Apple. In contrast with today, 20 years later, when Apple has several hundreds of million shares in the market and are $350 billion in market value, one of the highest market capitalization companies in US. Today, Apple is still a business successful story with diverse and worldwide products such as iPad, iPod, iPhone, and etc. Later on, we will see that our concepts in this lecture today ties very neatly to my story of Apple, the story of Mr. Jobs, who was an entrepreneur, a founder of Apple and then ex-employee, and finally, an executive of Apple. So, we're gonna talk about what is corporate finance actually. What is in mind of a CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, for long-term investments? Take Walmart CFO for example. Something will be like opening a new store in local area or in emerging market. is all about the capital budgeting. In the terms of capital budgeting, we will talk about property plants and equipments. Say, how much property plants and equipment should we carry in our business? With software company like Apple or Microsoft, we might considering whether to develop new operating system like Windows 10 or iTunes 8. These questions are on the CFO mind every day. With question number 2, where will we get the financing to build the new properties and equipment if we decide to go ahead? And with this question, we call it the capital structure questions. So what is capital structure? The capital structure is the mix of long-term debt and equity in the firm. Equity will come in the form of stock, and with debt, it will be in the name of bonds. Both bonds and stocks have similar name of securities. The third decision in the mind of CFO every day is, how do I manage my daily financial activities? It means working capital management. Working capital equals current minus current liabilities. When we talk about current assets, we talk about things like cash, account receivables, inventory, prepaid assets, and current liabilities are things like account payable, note payable, wages payable, etc. The working capital should be managed by CFO every day. So, on these 3 questions are duties of CFO to answer in daily operational activities. So, we come to a smaller question: who is the financial manager and the duty of financial manager? He is a typical organization task in large corporation. Again, I have 2 examples here, Apple Computer and Microsoft Computer, and they have slightly different titles of terms. Generally, the board of directors are at the top of the organization. They actually hire and fire the managers that will run the corporation. At the top is typically a chairman or chief executive officer. In this case, the CEO Steve Jobs at Apple, and at Microsoft, different titles as the chairman Bill Gates. Under these positions, corporation may have CFO to help running the organization. CFO, or we call it another name, financial manager. CFO is responsible for 2 groups, typically the treasurer and the controller. So, what is the treasurer worrying every day? Every day, the treasurer cares about the cash management. And on the controller side, they control about taxes, accounting, basically setting on the controls that are necessary in a corporation. You see that the CFO plays a very important role in any corporation, and we get 3 key questions in corporate finance that are conducted by the CFO every day. Now we move to the second part of our lecture today. If I decide to start a company, what type of organization is suitable to me? The organization is owned by one person, is the simplest organization form, and has unlimited liability, that is sole proprietorship. The organization which has 2 or more owners and unlimited liability is partnership. And finally, the corporation is the name of an organization which is legal person separate and distinct from its owner and has limited liability. Things need to consider as forming these three organizations. In the sole proprietorship, it is easy to start, not much regulation. The owner can keep on the profits, and income tax is treated as personal tax. However, it also faces some disadvantages, like you have unlimited liability with corporation. If anything goes wrong with your company, you can be sued. Other things like limited lifespan, limited amount of capital, and very difficult to transfer the ownership to another party. Therefore, you should think carefully before you start a sole proprietorship. In terms of partnership, you may get a partner and say, let's start a business like lemonade standing or newspaper standing, whatever it is. Partnership is quite simple and not expensive to form. The owners share profits according to their proportion of capital, and the income tax is treated like personal tax. Similar to sole proprietorship, this form of business also has some drawbacks, such as unlimited liability, limited life of business, and it is difficult to transfer the ownership. The last type of business organization is the corporation. A business created as a formal legal entity, separate and distinct from its owners. It is the most popular type of organization. Comparing to two former cases, this form of business has much more advantages like public ownership, limited liability, then you can protect your own assets with the corporation assets. The ease or easily of transferring ownership or raising capital, and unlimited life of business, so unlimited business life. However, it still faces some disadvantages. To form a corporation, you should follow a list of very strict regulations. Therefore, it could be expensive to form this type of business. Be careful with this point. Finally, in this form of business, you get double taxation because income tax is not considered as personal tax. It's not difficult to find out. Every form of business has its own benefits and drawbacks. It is up to you to choose the most suitable one. In closing, as homeworks, I want you to solve these questions. If you have to start a business, what kind of business would you start? A sole proprietorship, a partnership, or corporation? How would you organize your business? What structure would you choose and why? We will talk about these things in the next lecture. Thanks for listening.